Today's episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast with Jefferson Bethke, New York Times-bestselling author, is presented by the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. We got a ton of shows and content, interviews, and stories that are a part of this new Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. Make sure you're tuning in to shows like Get in the Game, Inside the Chapel, Table 40. These are all a part of Sports Spectrum's Podcast Network. You can listen to every show and every episode at sportspectrum.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Sportspectrum.com, the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network.
This is the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports intersect. Now let's bring in our host, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
And welcome everyone to Sports Spectrum's podcast. I am Jason Romano. We're so glad you tuned into the show today. I mentioned the website, sportspectrum.com. I also want to give you my email address, jason@sportspectrum.com. That is a direct email to me, jason@sportspectrum.com. And I give the email out because I would love to hear from you on any guest ideas that you might have for our show. Now, Jefferson Bethke might be a different type of guest, right? When you think about he's not an athlete, he's not a coach, he's not a broadcaster, but he's a New York Times bestselling author. He's also a guy who played baseball in high school and in college. He loves sports, and these are the kind of conversations I like to have. Of course, we like to talk to athletes and coaches, pro athletes, college coaches, college athletes, but I love talking to people like Jeff. Now, Jeff and I actually met, years ago. I think it was 2014, 2015, when he came to our church and spoke here in Connecticut. And he hung out. We got to talk a lot, hang out for, maybe almost 2 days or so, and just get to know each other a little bit. And now he's living in Hawaii and his growing family with 3 kids and married to his wife, Alyssa, and they have a podcast called The Real Life Podcast. It's just a lot going on with Jeff, and I'm so glad to see what God has done in his life. But this is really a great time to reconnect with him and to talk about this brand new book, which I think is going to be a bestseller. Take Back Your Family, from the Tyrants of Burnout, Busyness, Individualism, and the Nuclear Ideal. The book is out now. It released September 7th, 2021. And Jefferson Bethke is our guest today on Sports Spectrum. Let's take a listen. Jeff Bethke, what's going on, buddy? Welcome back to the show.
Doing good. I was trying to even remember when was I? Was it like 4 years ago? How long ago was I on?
So the last time you were on was 2 years ago. It's when you released. I think it was when you released your last book before this one, To Hell with the Hustle.
Yes.
We talked about the controversial title of putting hell in a book of faith. So
that was fun.
Seems like things are going well for you, though. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Yeah, thanks for having me back on, man. Just love your voice, love your podcast, love what you're doing. And it's, I still have such fun memories of our time together when I came and spoke in the church. And it's just, it's fun always rekindling and talking to you every once in a while.
I love it, man. You're on the other side of the country over there in Hawaii. So
today, other side of the world.
Just describe today. Like what does a day in Hawaii look like as we record this in late summer?
Right. Well, we just moved to like a place that most people wouldn't think of when they think of Hawaii. It's like, we're up at 3,000 foot elevation, kind of in like a mountain farm area now.
Okay.
And it actually is like sprinkling rain right now, but it was sunny this morning and it'll be sunny tonight. But yeah, it's nice summer still. We can see crazy ocean views, the West Maui Mountains. So it's pretty fun up here. There's kind of no such thing as winter here.
And that's not a bad thing. I think as I get in my old age, Jeff, in my late 40s now, I'm so done with the cold and the winters. My daughter loves the winter. Like she loves snow and the cold weather and Christmas. And I get that because I did too when I was, 16, but not when I'm in my late 40s. So we got to make a trip out to Hawaii someday. That's still on the bucket list.
100%.
Absolutely, man. You got a new book. How excited is this for you? You've tackled some really great topics in the past, but I don't think there's one more important than this. Take Back Your Family, the idea of family. I love the subtitle, From the Tyrants of Burnout, Busyness, Individualism, and the Nuclear Ideal. So tell us about this new release, September 7th, it's out.
Yeah, no, I'm so stoked too on the cover on this one, that kind of subversive 1950s Norman Rockwell, like upside down kind of vibe we went with. And then Yeah, the title, the subtitle, and it really said, I love titles and subtitles when it really does feel like this the heart of the book. Like I feel like we nailed it with that one. Where that's what this book's about. It's our journey, mine and Alyssa's journey of trying to escape this Western kind of experimental trap of family. I mean, I begin with this premise of the book where it's very obvious after 2 seconds of research that the way that the West, so kind of like 1800s on, like Industrial Revolution, Enlightenment on, the way that we do family is 100% different than any other culture or time period before that, across language, across culture, Western, Eastern, etc. And so it's very much an experiment. And the experiment, meaning like it's not how it's always been done. And the West has been running an experiment, kind of like what is an experiment? Experiment is let's do X in hopes that it'll do X, Y, right? Like that it'll give us the fruit or the benefit, whatever. And that X was let's make the individual the most important thing at the expense of the family, meaning family is nothing more than a springboard for the individual success of each member of the family. Now, of course, when I get into the book, I'm not saying no, the answer is the family. But I do think that there's a symbiotic relationship where, yes, the team is actually needs to be more elevated, the team aspect, and it always has been. And I tie that to the biblical vision of, I think that God supports that, where, if you not only center the team, but then you center the team with Christian values of the team sacrificing for the individual, the team loving, honoring, etc., then it becomes this symbiotic relationship that's really, really powerful. So what I say though with that experiment part is, one thing that you're supposed to always do in an experiment is you're supposed to stop the experiment and assess the data and then be like, is this working? Yeah. And it's not. Like, it's very, very clear, from like divorce rates to fatherlessness to burnout to anxiety. Like, not that everything can be blamed on the family, but it's very obvious to see the one-to-one trace of, oh yeah, this, the way we've disrupted work, the way we've disintegrated families, all that stuff ties back to the experiment kind of failing.
We talk about teams too. I think you compared it in the book, teams and clubs, right? And the difference between teams and clubs. And you also made a reference to the San Antonio Spurs, and you bring Greg Popovich and Tim Duncan and the Spurs into your book. So immediately I'm like, all right, there's the sports connection here, Jeff. Tell us about how the Spurs play a role in this new book, Take Back Your Family.
Yeah. Well, one easy way that I talk about in the book to like not feel like you're just drowning then in kind of the question of like, now what, is look at successful sports teams and look at successful businesses. The two places that still, basically the two places in our culture that still hold up the values that used to hold up the family are still around in strong businesses and strong teams. Now, of course, you can find toxic businesses and toxic teams. I'm not talking about that, but these core prospects of like, every good, healthy team has a secret handshake. They have a mission. They know what their championship is. They have uniforms. They have an insider language and culture, blah, 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 blah. You just go on and on. And families need to have that, and families don't. And so I take a lot of cues from the businesses and sports teams in the book. And the Spurs is a great one. I think I even have this quote in there that Manu Ginobili, even literally refers to Popovich as a father. You know what I mean? He's like, he's not just a coach, he's a father. And I'm like, that's getting at that core need that so many of us have, that so many of us wish for and long for, that the scripture actually puts as the original design. We have just stepped so far out of it. And Popovich does things like, what I talk about is the team club thing. But another thing I talk about that I think is even more pertinent is the difference between a coach and a babysitter. So most parents in the West are babysitters, right? Now that's even an indictment on me. I'm not just like, putting shame on anyone or anything. This is actually, I wouldn't even say it's even our fault. I think it's more of the macro culture that's infused us with these values. But a babysitter's job, now, of course, there's better babysitters than this, but the stereotype of babysitters is that their job is basically to keep the kids what? Starts with an S, safe, right? A babysitter's job is just to keep the kids safe. And if they do, then they are good. They're good babysitters. Now, that's a horrible coach, right? Like a coach's job is not just to keep the kids or the players safe. In fact, it's almost the opposite. A coach in a lot of regards is meant to push their players so much that they might even be deemed sometimes to be putting them in unsafe situations because of how much they're being called to stretch them, right? Now, a coach doesn't care about safety and security, even though they do. That's just lower on the priority list. They care about mission. They care about formation. They care about making these players into better men, women, people in society. And and so like what I talk about, that the sports analogy really hits home, is when you're a parent, your job is to look at it as a coach. And what does a coach do? A coach trains, a coach teaches, a coach forms. Notice how in the American Western parent toolbox, most parents only have two tools and both of them are reactionary. One's called discipline and one's called reward, right? So you use rewards to do stuff, and there's these work, by the way. Discipline's good, and healthy, depending on, if it is healthy and good. And then rewards are good, but they're both reactionary if you've ever thought about it, right? Meaning you can't give a reward until, like, your kid's the inertia kind of momentum starter, right? You're only just responding to them with either a reward or discipline. But a coach has a third tool called training. And a training is not reactionary, but it's proactive. And that's actually like, I want to form and teach this team in a way that takes us where we want to go. And I just think that's a very big difference and something that I think is helpful and we have to think about as us as parents.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic too. My daughter's, believe it or not, last time you saw her, I think she was in like 3rd grade or 4th grade. Well, she's going to be graduating high school this year.
That's crazy.
Or next year. Yeah. So it's a different stage of life for me as a dad, certainly too. This is much different. I almost feel like a coach more now at 16, 17 with my daughter than I did when I was 3, 4, and 5. Although I knew and recognized the teaching, the encouragement, things like that. But there was also this, don't do this and please do this type of scenario where I was wanting her to do certain things the right way, do this, do good in school. We're going to church, and then if you do that, we'll reward you. But yet if you don't do it, you're going to get punished. And it's especially when they're younger, and your kids are younger, right now still. I mean, I think how old is your
7, 5, and 2?
7, 5, and 2, right?
Yep.
So you're still in that stage. How have you been able to kind of manage all of that with the level of where you are playing coach, but also there is the do's and the don'ts, and make sure you do this and make sure you don't do that?
Yeah. So I think actually when it's younger, it's easier. And I think it actually, at least from what I've heard, in the sense of the coaching part. I mean, I think you can really instill, really obvious kind of things there that then later becomes more of like, mentor. And so like, so one easy way with younger kids is drills, right? And now, of course, immediately a lot of us jump to like, major pain and, and it being dramatic or whatever. Right. And that's not what I'm saying. I actually think it's one of the best, like our kids thrive on drills at that age, and it's fun. And I've like gamified it, meaning like, look for the places that your family is breaking down in it's usually the really annoying small things that you would never think are huge things, but actually the things that are driving you crazy and breaking down the family. So an easy example that I always talk about is like getting kids in the car. You would never think that like that's some huge moral, spiritual issue that's going to change your family. And it's really not at some level, but yet, you know what I mean? Most of us every day, we have to believe it absolutely taxes on us to be like, trying to corral 3 kids of, can you get in the car? And they're not, you know what I mean? Like, and they're kind of dilly-dallying, but it's not something that's that serious where we should like discipline or, you know what I mean? Or maybe, or reward. But so like, that's a really easy example when they're really little where we train for that. And it's crazy how it ripples out into a bunch of other stuff with obedience and listening and I gamify it. So it's like, hey, I'm going to set a clock for 60 seconds. The last one in the car is a rotten egg. Everyone else gets a candy or something like that. Right. We've done it different ways over the time. And all of a sudden it's fun. All of a sudden it's a game. And then all of a sudden we get in the car way better. And then you do that. Or when it's not even time to go, training is really good when you're doing it in times where nothing matters. What I mean by that is like, okay, we don't have anywhere to go, but I'm going to get out the stopwatch as a fun, like Olympic coach persona. And we're going to try to get in and out of the car in 5 times. And we're going to try to see if we can get faster each time. Or, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just like a fun, like just make it a game. And it's little stuff like that, how it actually does start to train your team. Take away all the things that actually because it's like most parents die the death of 1,000 paper cuts. You times that issue by like 100 throughout the day and you're wiped, you're angry, and you're grumpy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it really is, if you solve those little breakdowns, it's crazy how it kind of has this ripple effect of listening better, obedience better, team energy better. And then you're just not as grumpy and annoyed all the time as much either. So I would say that's a big one. And then later in life, that training starts turning towards mentorship, right? So Popovich would be a good example again, right? When he has a rookie on his team, okay, then that person's probably doing the drills. Like, hey, you don't know what it's like to be a Spur yet. So I want you to go do 5,000 layups over here and bank it off the backboard because we're not flashy and we're not sexy and we play Tim Duncan basketball. Do you know what I mean? Right? Yeah. So like you're not a Spur yet. So you are going to do all these drills, okay? Now, when you're Tim Duncan or Manu Ginobili or Tony Parker, sure, maybe they're still doing the drills, but at some level, we know that's a different relationship, right? We actually know they're probably even speaking into the team. they're probably even like kind of a pseudo coaching underneath Popovich. Do you know what I mean? Like it's different because they're older and they're not like just getting, they know what it's like to be a Spur and they can pass on that culture. So I would say when you have older kids, that's what it should look like. And if you confuse those two, then, you're going to disgruntle a teenager or have a kind of a wild younger kid that's never, being part of the team.
Jeff, where did you learn this? Because you grew up in a dynamic without a dad in a kind of broken home, tough circumstances. So where did you learn all of this?
No. Yeah. Good question. So that like the first couple chapters of the book is pretty much the whole story part. And so, like our mentors, Jeremy and April Pryor, they're just an amazing family who live in Cincinnati and who have leaned into, he just kind of had this epiphany around, he spent a lot of time in Israel and Jewish communities and just kind of started realizing that like, oh, something's amiss here. Like the scriptures seem to have a vision of family that isn't really matching the evangelical setting or you know what I mean? So they had this huge epiphany probably 20 years ago and just kind of started, making some of these changes and leaning into study and research, et cetera. And it just, and it transformed their family. Then they started teaching on it, giving resources on it. We got really close with them. And then it was about 8 or 9 years ago where we met them and started, implementing a lot of these things. And then now we created Family Teams, which is basically an online initiative that has all these tools and stuff based on this. And so, it was 100% through them. And then a level of trial and error. But kind of just it's like, I almost consider it like a little bit of the Matrix, a little bit of a seed of an idea. This idea definitely feels like one of those ones where like, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And once you start implementing it, you can't unimplement it. Like it's very much like it's powerful and rich, but it's kind of hidden in plain sight because of our Western minds and stuff. So
let's take a quick break to tell you again about our Sports Spectrum magazine, available now for just $18 for a 1-year subscription, just $30 for a 2-year subscription. I think it's the best thing that we do here at Sports Spectrum, and you can subscribe right now at sportsspectrum.com. It's super easy. You click on the magazine icon at the website, and you're good to go. You can actually get a digital version of the magazine to complement the print version that you will get in the mail when you subscribe to the Sports Spectrum magazine. It is a great resource. I tell people the magazine, it's not your typical magazine that you just pick up and kind of peruse through. This is one that I think is a resource for you as you continue in your ministry. And whether you're a coach or a teacher or a pastor or a leader, wherever you are, whatever influence you have, knowing that you want to share the gospel, maybe use sports as a gateway to share the gospel, the Sports Spectrum magazine is a great resource for you. It might be a great resource for someone else. You can get it for yourself, get it as a gift for someone else. Maybe get a bunch and go through it together in a team setting, in a small group setting. But you can subscribe right now at sportsspectrum.com. Again, $18 for a 1-year subscription, $30 for a 2-year subscription. Super cheap and available right now to order at sportsspectrum.com. He is Jefferson Bethke, the New York Times-bestselling author. New book is called Take Back Your Family, From the Tyrants of Burnout, Busyness, Individualism, and the Nuclear Ideal. The book released September 7th, 2021. We're happy to be having Jeff here on the show today. What was 2020 like for you, bro? I'm curious because you're in Hawaii and I feel like you're kind of, you're so pro-family anyways, but you do travel a lot too, and you do a lot of speaking. What was 2020 like for Jeff Bethke?
Yeah, good question. And so, it was, difficult like it was on all of us, but actually there was really special parts of it too. You know what I mean? Like there's a level at which we really loved it. And so one thing I would say is, how would I say this? I think the key word that people need to start asking is integration, right? Like, how do you integrate your family, given the rhythms, the rituals, life, work, vocation that you have? And so for me, now this isn't most people probably can't relate to a travel-based life unless you're like a, pharmaceutical salesman or me, like author, speaker, et cetera. But that job was easily splitting us, meaning I was constantly leaving, kids constantly kind of crying, when I'm leaving, don't want daddy to leave, Alyssa's drowning at home. And so I just had to make a call. Okay, well, if I want to do this, or if I feel God's called me to X, I don't think he's called me to X unless our team can do X. That doesn't necessarily mean we all speak or whatever, but just like basically, here's another way to put that, because I don't think that's necessarily true that you have to all go do something. But another way to put it is, if your family's not flourishing by you doing your mission, I personally doubt it's God's mission for you, or at least the way it should be, right? And so So one question I started asking is, okay, instead of splitting these apart, disintegrating, right? Me versus the family, travel versus at home. How do I integrate these two? Now that was tough. And sometimes it's us having to go into our own pocket and spend money, but it's basically what it's turned into now is I speak less. So that was the first thing. I say no more. We need to say no more based on our values. Most people don't say no based on their values, right? So say no more. That's an easy one. Okay. That's hard. It was a step of faith because that means less money, less job, but I said no more. It's kind of what it was more being strategic. Then on top of that, then I ask, okay, how can I integrate into this trip now? Now it's not that we all go because that's just not possible or feasible. Alyssa has a life back home too with the kids and et cetera, and we have a life here. And so one thing I started doing that's been really practical is I was like, okay, you know what I want these trips to be? Instead of me going and speaking, how about all these trips are high peak moments for each individual kid? So what I'll start doing is I'll start traveling just with one kid with me. Okay. Because they're at the age now where they can kind of hang. It's fine. You know what I mean? And I've trained them to be able to get there. And so, yeah. And so that's what I do there. It's like, just how do you say no more, integrate it together so they serve each other and go from there. And so whatever job you're in, you have to ask, like, is it me taking a lunch hour more at home? Is it or me more doing this? How do I integrate these and put these together?
As a guy who works from home, as a guy who has probably been working from home for a while, both you and I've been working from home since before the pandemic. What is that dynamic like for you? How do you work from home? How do you kind of build your rhythms to be with your family, but also to get work done?
That's tough. That's really tough. So I don't know at some level, kind of like you just have to practice and keep trying at some level. One thing I would say that's helpful for me is don't try to be something you're not, meaning like early on with me, I can be a little bit more flexible, but yet I was like, I'm going to be in an office 9 to 5, don't bother me. And it's like, well, that's not helpful to our family dynamics and rhythms, you know what I mean? And a little unnecessary. But I do need big blocks of time to write, to create, to not be interrupted. So one thing I tend to do now that's been really helpful, because I also personally I do think there's a blessing at allowing your kids to interrupt you and like say hi and see your work and what you do and explain it to them. So I kind of like, you have to mark the moments, meaning like, I don't think they just like all hours are not created equal. Does that make sense? And so I think like name it to yourself and to your family. So it's like, like I absolutely disappear and the kids almost don't know where I'm at. You know what I mean? Or it's a locked door. If it's, I need to be uninterrupted, you know what I mean? Just like completely. And it's kind of like an open door in my office. If it's like, hey, I'm working, but I would love if you just come stop by, say what's up, tell me what you're doing today, stuff like that. So I think that kind of soft approach with like a little bit of open hand, closed hand is really fun because then to the kids, it's not always like I'm unapproachable. It's not always like I'm not there. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, so but there is times where I have to do that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I got to ask you, as we're taping this, it's 2021. And your viral video that really sent you, catapulting, if you will, Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus on YouTube, 34.9 million views, which is just insane. January 10th, 2012, that was posted. So I have to presume that you recorded that sometime in 2011 or 2012. So we're on 10 years now since that video has been out. That's nuts to me. When I think about that video and how much it impacted people, it blows my mind because I know it impacted me. It led to a book and it led to so many different things. When you think back 10 years ago and where God has taken you and brought you to, it's got to kind of make you shake your head a little bit.
100%. I mean, I think it's been a wild ride. I think it's a testament. What I've learned is like, say yes more, ride the wave more, even when the wave goes down, like, just like, let, you know what I mean? Like, God is in control. Be open, always be checking with the spirit of like, man, is this where you want me? Be creative, take big risks, take big dreams, but it's harder said than done. But I think, it's absolutely, I think it's also a testament of like anyone who answers that question of like, where do you want to be 5 years from now? You never will nail that question. It'd be way past or way below. But you never right. No one can answer that question right. And so I think that's a little bit also of like faith, trust, you know what I mean?
Yeah, if I asked Jeff Bethke 10 years ago, or told Jeff Bethke, I went back in the Doc Brown time machine and said to you, hey, dude, you're going to have 3 kids, married. This video is going to go 35
living
million.
In Hawaii.
Living in Hawaii. All of those things. You probably would have shaken your head and said, no way, dude.
Totally. No, yeah. That's what's crazy is like, you can't predict it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's where you have to just be open to like have plans, but like know that the Lord can disrupt plans.
Jeff Bethke is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So glad to have him here back on the show today. I wanted to ask you this because you live in Hawaii, and watching sports in Hawaii has to be completely different than it is for me watching it on the East Coast up here in Connecticut, because games that start later, right? Like Sunday night football or Monday night football starts at 8:30 Eastern time here in Connecticut, but that's like 2:30 in the afternoon in the middle of the day in Hawaii. What's it like to watch sports in Hawaii compared to, I guess, anywhere else in the country?
No, I agree. It is weird. Football specifically, because that's probably the one people rally the most for here. I feel like no one cares about baseball or basketball here, which is kind of weird. Football tends to be a sport Hawaii cares about. But yeah, it's weird though, because it's like you're not going to have like friend parties for that. You know what I mean? You're not going to have everyone over at 7 a.m. So it is weird. That's when like the good games come in here, like a Monday night football, like the night games or Super Bowl. They're always later, so then it's more like an afternoon thing here. But yeah, it is weird. You kind of forget. Like I like sports and I follow it, but I have to do it on Twitter and stuff because like not only does the lifestyle here make you forget, like you're just kind of out and doing stuff. But just like people don't care. People care about sports here, but like it's not a cultural zeitgeist. You know what I mean? So
is sports something that you want to instill into your kids? Is that something you think someday, maybe if they want to play sports or get into it, that's something that you would encourage?
Yeah. So actually I did an Instagram post yesterday on that where and there was some good fun feedback. I love that. I'm definitely, and I played sports my whole life, all the way through college, 17 years, select baseball, just like the intensity levels through the roof. Loved it. A lot of good memories. My mom was amazing for sacrificing so much for me to be able to do it. But there was a little bit of when I graduated, like, what was that for? Like, kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, what was that for? Like you kind of just one day you're playing for 17 years straight, and then one day you're not, unless you go professional, then it's kind of more of a subtle like drop off. But it was just more like, I knew the exact day, the last game in college, just like, okay, that was fun. That's a strange feeling. Do I think that it was worth all of that dedication and time and energy? No, I don't. Why would that be? How could that be that worth it? Now, everyone who disagrees with me always starts peppering off the benefits. Well, sports does X, sports does Y, sports does blah, blah, blah. Of course it does. Of course it does. But there's a million other things that do that as well. You can get those benefits somewhere else for way less emotional cost, mental cost, physical cost, spiritual costs, right? Now, I'm really just harping on like high level select. I do think sports are important. Our kids, literally this week, our kids are all at sports camp. Like they love it. Their friends are there. It's a blast. They're all learning baseball. Like it's a blast. So I'm not anti-sports. I'd probably say I'm pretty close to anti-high level select. I think there's a little bit of an idolatry in the West. I think we push our kids too early, too fast. I think we try to live vicariously through our children and crush them in general. And I think it's just a dead end. Like why on earth would I dedicate thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, years and years and years, summers and summers and summers, change the whole family rhythm, by the way, to usually serve that schedule for, just so that the kids can learn how to cooperate? That's like what people say is the reason to play sports, right? Unless you pay professional. Now, it's pretty clear, in my opinion, pretty early if your kid's got that chance or not. Very clear. And if you want to chase that, I'm 100% game on that. Like that's a vocational, wise stewardship choice of gifting. Yeah, that's if you feel like to me, that's a different issue. That's a stewarding of a gift. Okay, that's different. But 99.9%, right? Now, you didn't expect I'd be saying this on the Sports Spectrum podcast, but so with all that being said, if our kids are just hungry for it, then I'm going to listen and I'm going to pay attention and I'm going to want to serve them in that. Does that make sense? But that doesn't mean we just jump from like doing sports camp to now we change our whole family structure just to go do this tournament. That just doesn't feel, you know what I mean? So it'll come down to integration. It'll come down to the stuff I've said. And if we can do that and they want to do it, then that's a blast. But I say with all that precursor of like, yeah, I think it's just not, I think it's a little too much.
Well, let me give you a couple examples. And I believe it or not, being the sports guy here, I completely agree with you. I think there's the
well, there you go.
There's the 1% who there's something special and unique.
Yeah.
And clearly
and chase that all the way through.
There's a kid that goes to school with my daughter. He's going into his senior year. He's been recruited since 9th grade. He's got a scholarship. He's committed to go to UConn, full ride. He had like 15 offerings to play basketball. He's 7'2", and he's really good at basketball.
Yeah.
That's the 1%. Like
yes. Well, that's stewarding. Then that would be a waste of his gift too.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
Yeah.
And he loves it, by the way, too. So there's a passion involved with
Yep.
this, not just a talent. But then there's like my daughter loves playing softball, loves playing volleyball, not dedicated. She's got good talent, but she's not. I mean, I think if she wanted to work on it, she might go to college or whatever and play. But she has other things that she's interested in, other relationships.
She didn't go, it's not everything is revolves around that.
So trust me on this when I say this, Jeff. I wanted her to kind of do all the clubs and stuff if she wanted it, but she didn't want it. And so I had to back off, but she still loves playing. And that's what makes her a great teammate. So she wants to play. If she doesn't do great, that's okay.
It's the love of the game. And see, and that's when the benefits are really good, because it's like, we're not revolving our life around it. They're having a ton of fun. It is forming them. Now they're learning to cooperate, have teammates, etc. There's not this immense pressure on them. I think another way that probably covers everything I said, that I think is kind of the best way to think about it, is all I'm trying to say is I think most people, their default is yes, yes, yes when it comes to sports. When I think the default should be no, 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 but argue me into it. Like I can be reasoned into it. I can be argued into it, but argue me into it. Meaning like, give me legitimate reasons. Does that make sense? When most people, like, they don't have any legitimate reasons. It's just like, this is what everyone else does. This is what we're going to do. We want to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, that, so it's kind of like argue me in instead of argue me out. And then I think if you get argued in, then you should be doing it because there's good reasons.
And it shows a passion, right? It shows that there's a passion that they want to do it. So you let them try it. And if they discover that they're loving it and want to keep going, you let them go. So
100%.
No,
it's all a dance. It's all a dance.
It really is. But it's perception, or not perception, but perceptiveness on your part to see and to harness that. Whether if you notice, Jeff, and because you play baseball, you know what it takes to be good at a certain level. If you see one of your 3 kids is like dominating, you might want to have that conversation just to see if they're stewarding their gifts the proper way. So.
Exactly.
Absolutely. He is Jefferson Bethke. Dude, it's so good to catch up with you. The new book, I'm so excited for you. Take Back Your Family. It's out September 7th, 2021. jeffandalissa.com is the website, and it's available everywhere. So you can find it wherever you buy books. Congrats on the new book. I hope it's another New York Times bestseller. And thanks for joining us, dude. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
And many thanks to Jefferson Bethke, the New York Times bestselling author, for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. The new book, again, called Take Back Your Family, is available everywhere books are sold. You need to go check it out and get a copy. I have a feeling that this new book is going to be a bestseller as well. And I love Jeff because I know he loves sports and I know he keeps track on what's going on, but he also lives a different life in Hawaii, where he's watching sports in a different way that I think a lot of us, as we say here on the mainland, if you will, watch sports, because especially being on the East Coast, where everything is designed accordingly to the East Coast audience in some ways, where it starts at 8:30 and it starts at a time when you can gather and get people together. And in Hawaii, it's just a different animal. So glad that he talked about that with us. Crazy that it's been 10 years since his viral YouTube video, Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus. 34.9 million views. It's still there on YouTube. You can go back and watch it. And it's actually one of those videos that I go back and watch maybe every couple months or so, because it just really makes sense. Even to this day, 10 years later, it's still relevant on the idea of loving Jesus. But man, religion can be so toxic. So Jefferson Bethke, appreciate him, appreciate his, willingness to come on the show again, and all the best to him with his brand new book, Take Back Your Family, that is out now. Thanks to Jeff. Thanks to you for listening as well. As we mentioned earlier, make sure you check out our website, sportsspectrum.com, for all of our content. We got our podcast network of shows there. We got stories and articles, different stories from all over the sports landscape. And then we have devotionals that you can actually start your day every morning with right there at sportsspectrum.com. When you're there, make sure you click that newsletter icon and input your email address. That way you can stay tuned to all of the happenings that we have here at Sports Spectrum, and it's free. We'll send you an email once a week for Sports Spectrum Weekly and just update you on the shows and the podcasts that you may have missed. So just click that newsletter icon at sportsspectrum.com and you're good to go. It's all free right there at the website, sportsspectrum.com. Also, make sure you subscribe and follow this podcast. Tell someone about Sports Spectrum. And remember, we just want to be resources that you can use to share the gospel with someone by using sports as a place to do it. Sportsspectrum.com is the website, but you can check out our podcast. You can check out the magazine. These are all resources that you can share your faith with someone else through the stories that are happening in the sports world. So we love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you join us next time for a brand new episode here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. And have a great rest of your day.